Over the last couple of days, I've been diving into and researching what you should do before, during, and after a wildfire to protect your property, to protect yourself, to protect your community. And the more I learned, actually, the more confidence I gained in thinking that there actually is some solutions to this wildfire crisis, because there's lots of little steps that you can do to almost guarantee your own safety. Now, I won't go that far, but when I go through this list, you'll see what I mean. So there's things you should do before, during, and after. So let's just dive into before a wildfire first. And it actually starts well before a wildfire, just choosing where you should live. Now, one of the more dangerous places to live is either completely in the forest or what you would call the wildland-urban interface. You can also see this where the chaparral of California bumps into some of our houses. And the reason this is dangerous kind of makes sense. A fire could start in the fuels, and then if houses are directly near those fuels, well, the fire could spread into the houses. So that's why in a lot of these communities that bump up against these wildland areas, it's good to have a little buffer zone, some kind of fuel break there. There's a number of different ways to do this, but this was actually one of my favorite parts of my research. Was they're saying strategy that people are using these days when they're designing new communities is along the outskirts of these towns, they'll have maybe a bike path or maybe parks going around it or some kind of golf course or just anything that's going to provide separation between, let's say, the chaparral, which is extremely flammable, and then some of the homes. And if you have that fuel break, it's a pretty good defensive barrier from a wildfire coming into that area. So choosing a home, you would maybe just want to choose a place that has very little fire danger. But then if you are in a community that is in the wildland urban interface, then you would want to choose one that has some kind of nice fuel break around it. Now, let's say you're already in your home, so you can't change it. Is there anything you can do at this point? Well, there are some things you can do, and it maybe would be better to already start planning when you're maybe building your home, because there's many different things that you can build into homes to make them less flammable. But if you already have your home, you can also just hopefully sub out some of your more flammable parts of your home with ways that would reduce your risk of your home burning down. And the number one thing I should state is your roof. That is one of the key ways that homes burn down during wildfires. I couldn't find the exact statistic, but I believe it's a huge number. Something like 90% of houses that burn down in a wildfire happen because the roof catches on fire first. And the way that this happens is you have your fire, it's off at a distance, and then a little burning ember will be picked up and it's dropped on the roof. And then obviously the worst kind of roof to have would be some kind of wood shakes or shingles. And then you also don't want to have a large amount of vegetation built up in your gutters. That's something that my dad and I do before every single wildfire season, especially as things are starting to get hotter. We go up on the roof, we blow off all the leaves, all the needles, and then blow out the gutters as well. So when it comes to your roof, you want it to be some kind of non-flammable material. It's called Class A materials, something like clay. They even had some kind of combinations of concrete and asphalt tiles that you could put on your roof. And then many people also have little attic vents. You want to have screens over those. Otherwise, a burning ember could just drop right in there. And then all of a sudden your attic's on fire and your home burns down. So roof, that is a huge one. And I actually did a video not too long ago about this company. I forget the name of it. It's somewhere in that video, but Q cabins, that's what it's called, where they're creating these non-flammable houses. And one of the features that they had was metal roofs. So that's very important. Next step would be thinking about what kind of windows you have. You want either double or triple pane windows. And the reason for that is during a wildfire, especially if you have some fuels around your house, there's so much heat generated that it can actually just shatter your window, or some of the heat can just radiate through your window. And then, obviously, now that you have a big hole in your house, it's easier for the flames to get inside. Now, that does remind me, though, if you have some kind of flammable curtains, those are one thing that you'd maybe want to take down during a wildfire. And then, also during a wildfire, you would also want to take any flammable couches or chairs that you might have near your windows and move those to the center of the room because that is where a lot of the heat can come in. So windows, double, triple pane, and also maybe clear away any fuels that you might have right by the window. Next, walls, you want them to be non-combustible. And I did read that if you have non-combustible walls, or I'm sure with anything that I'm going to be talking about in this video, it can actually lower your fire insurance, which is great news. So you spend a little money to improve your house. You not only increase the probability that your house doesn't burn down, but then you can also actually save money later on in terms of your fire insurance. And that is pretty huge because fire insurance, the prices of it, the premiums are just skyrocketing in California right now. And a couple of big companies, I believe it was State Farm and Allstate, don't even offer new policies because of wildfire, and I believe because of floods too. Next would be your deck. You want to have a deck that is on the ground. The reason you want this is because if you have a deck that's up in the air, fuels can grow underneath it, or little embers could fall underneath it, and then if it catches the deck on fire, well, then it's much easier for the rest of your house to catch on fire as well. And then when it comes to your garage, that's something that you want to know how to open and close even if the power goes off, because that's going to be a pretty important part of what you should do during a wildfire. But I'll just wait a second to talk about that. First, I want to get into defensible space, because that's one of the most important parts of protecting your house from wildfire. And there's 3 different zones. There's the zone that's within 30 feet of your house. There's the zone that's 30 to 100 feet away, and then past 100 feet. So within 30 feet, that's where you pretty much want it to be fireproof. Maybe you have a lawn directly around your house, and it's well watered, so it's pretty much green. It's not really going to catch on fire. If it did, it wouldn't be all that intense. And then 30 to 100 feet, that's where I like the little, I don't know, it's not an acronym, but some easy way to remember it. They said lean, green, and clean. So the lean aspect is talking about you don't want lots of brush or lots of trees directly next to each other. And then you also don't want to have what's called ladder fuels. So maybe you have one bush here, you want to have a little space between the next bush, so then one doesn't catch on fire, and then all of a sudden your whole backyard's on fire. And then what I meant by you don't want ladder fuels is you don't want grass, then brush, then a tree, because then all of a sudden you have ladder fuels, which the grass catches on fire, then the brush does, then the tree does, and then you have a huge flame that could easily catch your house on fire as well. It's also going to be kicking up a lot of embers that could go on your roof, which is hopefully made of some kind of metal and not too flammable. So in this 30 feet to 100 feet zone, within about 30 feet to 60 feet, that's where you want to maybe leave 30% of your brush or natural vegetation. And then maybe 60 to 100 feet is where you want to leave 50% of it. And the reason you want to leave some of your vegetation, you might be thinking, why not just clear out all your fuels? Well, for one reason, that wouldn't look very good. And it is nice to have natural vegetation and native vegetation, because that's also part of the ecosystem. It's good for all the animals that might live in the area. But you also have to weigh different risk factors, especially if you live on a slope. Wildfire is not your only concern. You're also concerned about mudslides, and it's the fuels that hold your hillside in place. Or I shouldn't exactly call them fuels in this situation. We'll just call them plants. And it's the root systems that hold your hillside in place. And a lot of times, if you take out the brush, which has really great root systems, some grasses are just going to grow in, which can also carry flames. But then they're also not going to provide that great structure into your hillside. So then some big rains come, and any Californian knows we do have some pretty big rainstorms. The majority of our rainfall, actually it's about 30 to 50% of our rain comes from just 3 to 5 big storms per year. So we pick up a lot of rain in a very short period of time that can lead to mudslides. So you do want some vegetation holding your hillside in place. And then outside of 100 feet, that's where you're pretty much good as long as you've kind of protected your inner zones. So actually that doesn't exactly wrap up what you should do before a fire. There's also some other small items. One thing you can do is try to take an inventory of your house for insurance purposes. How you could do this? Well, actually, I won't get too into this. Check with your insurance company exactly how they'd want you to go about this process. But in the very least, what you could do is take your phone out, go into video mode, take a video of all the different things that you have in your house, and then just email yourself that video so you have it on record, just so you can make the insurance process easier and maybe get credit for all of the different items that you would maybe want to be reimbursed for. You also have to check exactly how insured your house is, because I know a lot of people, their house burns down and then they find out that they were actually underinsured and they don't get as much money back as they were hoping. So that's important. It's also important just to have an emergency plan and a kit. You want to have all the different items. You can find the whole list online. And then also just the plan of what you're going to do, maybe where you're going to meet with your family, what kind of resources you can use to find current information if a wildfire starts to happen. And then this does kind of dive into what you should start to do during a wildfire. And the first one I would say is stay up to date with all the different resources out there. There's CAL FIRE, there's your local community, there's all sorts of different places you can find information. And it is very important to take evacuation orders and warnings seriously. So there are different levels. What is it? I believe there's evacuation warnings and then there's evacuation orders. I believe order is the one where you have to go. That one's the mandatory one. Don't quote me on that. I'll look that up later and make sure I have that right. But you may be tempted to stay even after a mandatory evacuation order has been given, but there's a couple reasons why you shouldn't. One, I'm pretty sure it's actually a misdemeanor in California to stay. And then two, the reason you would stay is obviously because you want to protect your house, but your house will most likely actually have a better chance of surviving if you just leave. Because I've heard this from numerous firefighters where they say, one of the most difficult things when they're trying to protect people's properties is the fact that they actually just have to be worrying about evacuating people. And if everybody just left, then they would just be able to focus on protecting the homes. And instead, a lot of the time, they're trying to get people out of there and wasting the time that they could have spent protecting your house. So that's all very important to know. But if you are in your home, say a fire front's come through or it's about to come through and you haven't evacuated yet, there are some different things that you can do to prepare your home for the wildfire during the wildfire itself. So other than keeping up to date with current information, there's a few things you should do outdoors and indoors. Now, I mentioned garages earlier. One thing you want to do, you want to know how to open it and close it without power because the power is probably going to go out. Then you want to back up your cars into your garage. Now, the reason you want to back them up in is so that you could hop in and easily get out. But then you also want to keep your garages closed, and you only want to open them when you're about to actually leave, because usually garages are filled with lots of clutter and lots of flammable material. So you want to keep that closed. Now, if you can't park your car in your garage, you want to keep your car actually pretty far away from your house, because cars are notorious for catching on fire during wildfires. Embers could go under. Sometimes there will be oil on the ground. The tires can catch on fire, and then the car goes up in flames. So you don't exactly want that near your house. And I imagine gas tanks have something to do with the flammability of a car as well. So back it into your garage or get it away from your house. Then you're going to want to take any flammable patio furniture or anything you have like that outside. You're going to want to bring that inside. You're going to want to also fill up different tanks around your house with water. So maybe fill up your garbage can, put that outside. Firefighters could use that to put out fires. You could use that to put out fires if you are still at your house. Then you want to fill up your sink, your bathtub. Worst comes to worst, you could use the water in your toilet. And that's if, let's say, an ember comes, it starts a little fire, and then you can put it out yourself. I did just mention tanks. That also just reminded me, you want to turn your propane tank off and then also turn off your natural gas. I believe you do that one at the meter because you don't want any gas flowing around your house. And that also just reminded me of something that you should also do actually before the wildfire. So we're going back in time here a little bit. But I guess during a wildfire, if you haven't done this yet, this would be a good thing to do. You don't want to have a wood pile near your house. You want to have that at least 30 feet away, because it's basically like having a gas tank right next to your house if you have a wood pile right next to your house. Fire comes through, that's going to, how the book put it, they said that is going to blow up like 160 gallons of gasoline. So you want to have that wood pile away from your house. So I was talking about getting some water, having that in some stations around your house. You want your hose attached with maybe a spray nozzle on it. You want to spray down your roof. You can spray down your plants, but that's actually something you want to focus on before the wildfires happen. You want to make sure that lean, green, and clean. The green part of that is watered consistently so that your plants have a lot of moisture in them. The reason for that is when the fire comes to your plants, it has to evaporate the moisture out of your plants before the plant can catch on fire. So you want your plants to have as much moisture as possible. If they're dry, fire is going to come in and just basically just blow that plant right up and then move on to the next one. So continuing that, lean, green, and clean. Clean was the other one I forgot to say. You want to clear out any leaves or litter or dead branches around your house, especially in the within 30 feet zone, and then also within the 30 to 100 feet zone. So that's before wildfire, but if worse comes to worse, you could do that during the wildfire as well. So outdoors, we talked about watering stuff down, bringing some stuff in, and then inside, as I mentioned, you want to bring flammable stuff to the middle of the room, and then something I never thought of before, but you actually want to turn all your lights on, because it's much easier for firefighters to find your house in the case of a wildfire. So I believe this video is probably long enough at this point. I was going to go into after some of the main things. If you're coming back to your house, watch out for power lines. Watch out for parts of your structure that might be damaged and could fall. Be careful about drinking water. And then be careful about when you turn your propane tank back on or turn your natural gas on. You should maybe inspect that before you turn it back on. And then as you'd expect, you also want to get in contact with your insurance company to see what happens there. So I was trying to keep this video short, so I'm going to end it right there. But this is something that I'm going to look into a lot more over the next couple weeks, and I'll keep you posted as I do learn more. Thanks for watching.